Good afternoon. Welcome to Coffee Tech and Opportunity. I'm Will McNeil, CEO and founder of Black Tech Jobs. On Coffee Tech and Opportunity, we talk to executives from HR, technology, diversity, inclusion, and talent acquisition. And today we have a fantastic guest. I couldn't be more excited about the conversations that we're going to have. And we also want to remind everyone who's watching or who's logging on right now to um, be sure to share comments or questions. So we'll kick things off, and I'll ask that you find your way to the chat. And if you're on Twitter, you're on your phone, make sure to click the title, Coffee Tech and Opportunity, and that will allow you to chat in the chat so everyone can see across all platforms. And we'll also ask that if you're on Twitter and you're watching live, that you click on the photo of the live stream if you want to join the chat so everyone can see your comments and questions across all platforms. Thanks again for joining us. Today we have Eloisa Domingo joining us. And when I say she's a dynamo, she's an absolute dynamo. And I'm going to bring her on board so we can begin Coffee Tech and Opportunity and we can start our chat. Please welcome Eloisa Domingo to Coffee Tech and Opportunity. Hi, Eloisa. How are you today?
I'm good. Well, thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. I want to introduce you to the audience who's logging on. And if you're on LinkedIn and you haven't been able to get in, please join us on YouTube. There's a link on our LinkedIn page that will take you to the YouTube page so that you can join us. If we weren't able to send you a message before, there were a few folks who had some difficulties. So today we are honored to have Eloisa Domingo, founder and CEO of 410, dynamic leader in inclusive crisis management with over 2 decades of experience. Eloisa excels in driving transformation, change, and fostering inclusive cultures across various sectors. She's a sought-after speaker and a strategic partner known for expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Please welcome again Eloisa Domingo. And I'm just so excited. She has launched her own consultancy and is going to change the world. But in her history, if you looked at her LinkedIn profile, she's worked for great companies like Allstate, and you've been in pharma and academia. And I couldn't be more excited to just have someone with such a broad experience and recent and modern experience. So without further ado, let's get to it. Let's talk about the job market.
Sure.
So the job market is getting mixed reviews. I've talked to a number of experienced professionals from technology, sales, marketing, HR, and D&I, and they all say it's a tough market. What advice would you give people as they market themselves to this very complicated and competitive job market?
Yeah, well, it's so important. I feel like, that's been such a hot topic as of late, as you mentioned, unfortunately, given the economy, but additionally, AI, right? AI is really taking over a lot of roles, eliminating opportunities. But it's a pro and a con, right? I mean, we need technology, we need the advancements and things like that. But as you mentioned, then certain roles that we've had for a really long period of time that have been filled with people talent kind of goes away. So as you mentioned, for those of you who are listening, and for those of you who will listen, later, and you're looking for how to kind of get into the job market, really what I would say is kind of really one thing: control your narrative. Control your narrative, control your narrative, control your narrative. And what I mean by that is this: make sure that when somebody goes on LinkedIn, so Will mentioned to you earlier, go check out, Eloisa's LinkedIn. So even without knowing me, you're going to read something about me, or you're going to go and look at a picture, and you're going to figure out some narrative about me. What I want to make sure to do, if I'm looking for a role, or I'm looking for an opportunity, a job, or anything, I want to make sure that whatever you're reading, whatever you're looking at, that I'm able to tell you what I want you to know, right? So control that narrative. So for those of you who are looking or job seeking, or even if you're not, making sure that your resume is up to date is critical. I know a lot of people say that, but one thing I'll twist to it is this: we talk a lot, Will, about tech. One thing about tech that will, and many people already know this, when you submit your resume to an online portal, it's not a human being that's looking at your resume right off the bat. It is typically software that the portal will feed your resume into, and your resume is looked at for the keywords from the job description, or if your resume format is too complicated, logos, too many bold words, headers that are in boxes. I know that we all try to make everything look really pretty and stand out and all this other stuff, but especially for resumes that you submit to portals, try to make that as simple as possible. Match your keywords, know that it's going to go through some sort of software that will bleed out great candidates, simply because your resume isn't formatted in a way that a computer can read and kind of send to the next stage. So that's number one. Number two, make sure that on your LinkedIn, you are, again, controlling your narrative. Put forward on the features section things that you really want people to understand and know, that tell about what it is that you want to focus on and what you're accomplishing, right? And then, really the other thing that I would say is, again, you're making, kind of tech and software your friend. Think about, but also think about, what is it that I, kind of really want to do. As Will mentioned earlier, I'm in a space right now where I have an opportunity to start my own company, and I could have done anything. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I thought about opening a dog daycare. I thought about, I know, right? I mean, and by the way, that's probably going to still happen. I thought about starting, just doing all speaking engagements, or starting a foundation. You really have to sit and figure out, what is it that I'm really good at? What is it that that brings me joy? And then from there, again, control that narrative and tell that story. That isn't necessarily the silver bullet, because like you said, well, it's a really, really tough job market, and the prospects out there are really high. The competition is high. But by controlling your narrative and making sure it's clear, and you're thinking about how technology also can bleed out some of your resumes, hopefully that helps, kind of get through some of the barriers.
Thanks for that. I want to chime in and share a couple things too.
Mm-hmm.
A few things to get. LinkedIn has just become the place where people go
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
connect, network. I've been to a number of networking events recently. Sherm was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to everyone who's in HR who had a chance to be there. And I would tell you, everyone I met, whether they were in their 20s or in their 50s, pulled out their phone,
Yeah.
showed me their QR code,
Yeah.
or I showed them mine, and we connected on LinkedIn. It's more sticky than a business card
Yeah.
or any of the other systems, because it's a place where you go for information, to share information about business and industry and updates that are happening with you and your network professionally.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say also about that you commented on about the resume is, for those who are applying to multiple jobs, different companies have different cultures and they have different languages. And so
Yes.
ensuring that the words that are on your resume are a reflection of the way that they label those same concepts at their
Mhm.
company. And
Yeah.
so I'll use the word sales, for example, which could be interchangeable with business development. But if it's a business development role, you want to speak the language of the employer.
Great point.
And every word matters. And I'll
It does.
also give you a little AI game for those of you who are already using ChatGPT or other large language models. Quick prompt, ask Chat. You can copy and paste the job description into whatever form of AI you're using today, and ask it for the key words in the document.
Mm.
And then make sure those keywords are clearly listed
In
on your
your
resume,
Mhm.
and double check to make sure they're also on your LinkedIn profile. And so as recruiters are looking, they are also searching keywords. Technology
Yeah.
is such a key part of the
Yeah.
way that people find jobs and that jobs find people.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is helpful, good advice to those folks who are actively looking or passively looking. And we're going to come back to this topic a little bit, because
Mhm.
people aren't just looking for one type of job anymore. There's a lot of folks considering career pivots. Innovation and technology, in some cases, is shrinking the universe for job opportunities.
Yeah.
And so this is a good conversation that we'll have in a little bit. So I want to step back and ask always another question.
Mhm.
In response to this job market, people have been forced to make pivots. and expand their thinking about what jobs to apply for and what new skills to develop.
Mm,
What are your thoughts on making a career pivot? Because you've just recently made
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and 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 how can people prepare for the next phase in their career?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's such a good question. Well, one of the exercises that I went through just recently, because my pivot has been, well, as you know, it is recent, as in like a couple months. So one of the things that I had to do is there's an exercise that I heard of, and I would encourage those who are listening to think about this. I kept thinking, I know that I'm good at a lot of things, right? I mean, for goodness sake, I could open a dog daycare and I'm pretty sure it could be really successful. Or I could open a consulting firm on diversity and stuff, and that would be successful. That's a huge spectrum. So what is it that I actually, want to do? You got to decide that before you talk about skill acquisition. So an exercise I would encourage you to do if you're career pivoting is write down, for all of the roles that you've ever had, write down the things that you didn't really enjoy about that role. And I didn't say that you weren't good at. What I'm saying is just the things on a daily basis that you didn't enjoy. So, for example, if you didn't enjoy managing a team, for example, like you were good at it, but it wasn't you kind of the funnest thing that you did, right? Or answering questions that a journalist asked. If you didn't really enjoy that, write that down, okay? And then on the other side of the page, write down the things that brought you joy every day, right? I really loved working on marketing campaigns. I really loved talking to the sales team. I loved figuring out problems, right? I loved it when the president would come to me and I would advise the board. I mean, write those things down and keep refining that. Then when you realize what actually brings you, happiness, joy, which is essentially you using the talent that you were given, then what you can do from there, Will, to your point, is what skills does it take? What do you either have to acquire or polish up, to do, that work? I think that you'll find when you lead off with what do you actually like to do, want to do, good at doing, joyful, about doing, I think that you might find that the skills, you actually already have those skills. You just kind of need to elevate or, polish, those skills. So, for me recently, as I switched from corporate America to, kind of an entrepreneurship, people call it solopreneurship. Some of the things that I had to figure out was that I was good at, making decisions and kind of moving things quickly. Some of the things I needed to polish up on, I need to polish up on marketing and writing things like my website. Those are some things, because I'm a one woman, show now, as opposed to having a bunch of people. Making sure that I know how to work with networks, all of those kinds of things. So I'm going to answer your question a little bit different in terms of skill acquisition and skill polishing, in that start with, again, what do you really want, to do? My hope then is that as you pivot, that'll help you to understand, okay, I could actually really get into this, either do it as a consultant or a full-time job. And then that'll help you figure out what skills you need to either acquire or polish up, from your past roles.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I'll tell you, there's no shortage of great material. Lisa and I were talking about it. A great read and
Yeah.
process that we went through as a company. I'm going to kind of publicly
Yeah.
endorse it, which rarely do. This is not a paid endorsement, but I would tell you, as you can see, I've got stuff stuck in mind, so I really use and read it. EOS, which is probably showing up in reverse on my camera. What the heck is EOS? It's written by Gino Wickman and Tom Bower. Is something I'm rereading and I'm sharing with folks who are making career pivots
Mhm.
that are leading down a track in entrepreneurship, which is a great structural way to operate your business, communicate with your teams, lead your organization through strategy. So there's more than one pathway. I meet so many people in technology who are uber talented, and they too could do anything. And many of them have aspirations to do entrepreneurship and or have done it and are planning to do it again. So, and if you're wherever you are in the country, there's just so many resources as I travel from the East Coast through the Midwest, through the Southwest and Southeast, and on the West Coast. I meet people and great places, and there are ecosystems for entrepreneurship like I've never seen in my lifetime before
Mhm.
today. So let's shift gears a little bit. You've invested many years of your career as a diversity leader. Um, And I wanted to talk about this topic because I was on a call yesterday with the folks at the Caper Center,
Mhm,
um, who do a lot of investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
mhm.
How would you describe the current DEI climate, and what should companies and DEI advocates focus on today
Yeah.
versus what they were focusing on 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so first of all, the climate today, Will, in terms so first of all, that we are in an election year where diversity topics are one of the top two, one, two, topics for the GOP, where both sides of our kind of political spectrum are utilizing topics around diversity, inclusion, and equity, um, to define and or polarize and or separate. That it's unfortunate, but it is kind of what's happening. And so we're in a space of using it to help to push people to make decisions. um, Over the past, recent years, as you mentioned, what is the difference between now versus 2 to 3 years, and what companies need to focus on? um, the quick answer to me is, how are you responding, or how are you prepared to respond in a crisis? If you look at hospitals, like, as Will mentioned, I come from healthcare and academic medicine and things like that. So one of the things in academic medicine or healthcare or hospitals that we were always good at, if you go into any hospital or major medical system, they're going to have ICUs, emergency departments, things that are specific around acute medicine, which means that you've got one line where you've got patients who are coming in who are sick. They're called outpatient. They're sick, but they're not in an emergency setting. It's not acute. It's not a crisis. Then you've got this other set of staff, spaces, beds, medicine that is specifically designed if a crisis occurs. Okay. What's hard, Will, is that, and here's the thing, because in healthcare we all know crisis occurs, patients get sick, and patients crash. Okay, so hospitals are actually a really good model to look at, because they are prepared for what will eventually occur. They just know patients will get sick, patients will crash, you will have an emergency. Unfortunately, for diversity and for companies don't, we didn't really realize that 2 to 3 years ago. Until the Black Lives Matter movement has been going on for a very long period of time, but really until the death of George Floyd, and then all of the other, Black lives that were hurt, destroyed, and all of that really caused and pushed companies to be like, I have no clue what I'm supposed to, do in this instance. Crises like that were, potentially, and again, take this with a grain of salt, were pushed to the front, few and far between. They were not as rapid. Global crises weren't as rapid. But now, because of the inception of kind of global markets, and like you said, AI, and going various places to look for talent, the world really has become flat. And so everything in the world has become now relevant, right, to the business case, to the people in your company. And so crisis becomes much more close. 2 to 3 years ago, companies didn't need to figure out how to respond to crisis within 48 hours. They didn't. And so now that crisis is coming much more rapidly, and crisis is also much more acute. I mean, you're getting to kind of make the analogy, the patients that are coming in are sicker, and it's coming in faster. So imagine if you're a company like that and you don't have an ICU, you don't have an emergency department bay, you don't have people who are trained to do that, right? That's what happened in COVID. So it's the exact same thing here for diversity crisis. We are in a space right now for the past 2 to 3 years and moving forward, Will, where diversity crises are very, very real. Look at a variety of things that are going on with, Starbucks and Target and Disney. They actually have really strong crises models, but even those very, very strong and large brands and companies, if not prepared on how to respond in the immediate as well as for longitudinal impact, you are really kind of caught, quite frankly, with your pants down. So the space that we're in is the age of diversity crisis. Companies need to be prepared proactively to figure out what is your diversity identity. then when you hit crisis, how are you actually responding so that you're not kind of twiddling your thumbs and saying, I have no clue, what we're going to do. And then post that, how are you taking a crisis and using it as an opportunity to define your brand? I'll say one thing. In the 1990s, 1980s, 1990s, well, you might remember this, Procter & Gamble kind of came out of nowhere and started putting out these ads for Black lives and policing. And everyone was like, why are they talking about this? Why are they putting out these commercials about how to talk to your kid about if a police officer stops you? Like, what is that about, right? They unapologetically at that time decided to really lean into Black lives, Black beauty, Black skincare products, the Black and African American experience in the United States. Unapologetically, they decided to do that. I wasn't at P&G, I didn't talk to them at the time, but what that has allowed them over time is because they unapologetically have leaned into that space. Every time that something happens with the Black or African American community, they've already made the decision, we're going to say something, right? We are a company that stands behind Black and African American individuals. We put it in our products. We invest in this. And so as a result of that, if that hurts that market or that community, we're going to say something in that moment of crisis. So again, unapologetically, they have immediately decided, but then in the long term, it allows them a lot of efficiency when crisis occurs. So those are some of the things that I would say for a company right now. If you haven't figured out kind of your crisis model, you haven't figured out what your values are in terms of diversity. You haven't figured out who's going to be in the war room when you figure out these things, when you talk about these things, who are making the decisions about what to say, how to say it, or if you're not going to say anything, in terms of crisis. That's really when brands can shut down, get hurt. We really are in a space of the cancel culture. So companies really can't afford to not have a crisis model around diversity right now.
I want to combine my last question with the previous questions a little bit and just chat for a second. So recently I was at a Black ERG event at a very large technology company. And I ran into an executive that I've known for a number of years, Black female. And we were talking about what's happened. So kind of why the market is tightened. So there's been a lot of layoffs. And I've talked to a few chief people officers who one of them told me that they lost 80% of their Black employees.
Wow.
As a result of the layoffs. And this person I was speaking with at the ERG session, she told me that her company had laid off a lot of people. And she noticed that a lot of her Black peers had they disappeared. Not necessarily people she knew, but people she was used to seeing around the campus, around the office. And she, as a senior person, asked the HR team what's going on?
Yeah.
And they said it was kind of a last in, first out. And because many of those hires were brought on in a post George Floyd environment.
Yeah.
What I said to her was, that's an interesting perspective. And I imagine in some cases it's true. But I had to remind her that she too was new. She had been there for less than 2 years. And so there is a pick and choose selection process that's far more sophisticated than timing. And so no one's really talking about it at scale, about the significant impact that tech layoffs have had on the Black tech community at a rate that far exceeds other communities.
Wow.
And I think it's tough for people to hear that. But I just challenge you to look around your office. So if you're gainfully employed, does it look the same as it did 2 years ago? And then how you feel or think about it is a separate thing that you must decide as an individual. But I do think that there's an important discussion that needs to be had, because we live in an age right now, just when we talk about the business case of this, how do we get the right people in the right seats doing the right things, but how do we bring different ideas to the table so we can help solve complex business problems? So I want to shift a little bit. So today, many HR departments are understaffed because they were impacted by layoffs. Lots of HR professionals, lots of recruiters found themselves out of work, and many, in some cases, are still out of work. that puts some pressure on the human element of recruiting. So
Yeah.
meeting people, more phone interviews, less outreach, more likely to use employee referral programs
Yeah.
than meeting new people who will join the company and bring new and different ideas from outside of the firm. What would you suggest for job seekers to ensure that their resume stands out? I know we talked about some of the tactical things.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about what can I do to boost my chances and improve my resume
Yeah.
outcomes?
Yeah. I think one of the things, and as you mentioned, we talked about, resumes. I'm going to expand it a little bit, Will, because it's a lot more than resumes. When Will and I first talked, we talked a little bit about this, and I said to him, people say all the time, at least when I was growing up, oh, it's all in who you know. Eloisa, when you're looking for a job, it's all in who you know. Let's twist that a little bit, because it's really not who you know, it's who knows you. Like I told Will, like, I know who Beyonce is, right? That doesn't mean she doesn't know who I am, right? So I can say all day long, I know Beyonce, I know Barack Obama, I know Oprah. They don't know me though, so it's not really in who you know, it's who knows you. Like you said, well, this is a completely different day and age where you have to have your resume, or what I would call your narrative, your full narrative, your LinkedIn story. If you have a personal website, your resume, tight. But the way to make yourself stand out, first of all, as you're controlling those narratives, the other way to control your narrative is get a hold, you got to hustle a little bit, you got to be your own entrepreneur. So you are your own company, right? So you need to be your own marketer. Contact the recruiter. Will is entirely right. Recruiters are being asked to do more with less because of a lot of layoffs or eliminations, or just kind of like the closing in of these departments. So they're trying to get as much done, and review of people talent and things like that. If you get in front of somebody, help make their job a little bit easier, right? And promote yourself, right? Contact the recruiter if you can. Or that's actually why LinkedIn, I think, is so great. You can find out the degrees of separation to somebody in talent acquisition or somebody in that role, and start promoting yourself, right? Have those little lines to say, hey, I applied for this role, or I'm very interested in your, whatever. I would really love to chat with you about this. It's interesting, Will, because I asked me this question a few years ago, and I don't know if I would have given you this advice, but now as somebody who has to promote myself, the number of cold calls and the number of cold emails and cold outreach that I've had to do on LinkedIn is actually a little bit scary. But for every probably 5 emails that I've sent out, probably 3 people have written back to me and said, yeah, like, I'll take 15 minutes, and talk to you. That's actually how Will and I met, and so it was one of those things where it's like, I don't really know. I'm trying to see if maybe there's a way that we could talk. I mean, for me and Will, it was potential, partnership. But for those of you out there that are looking for a role or interested in that company, do a little bit of outreach. The other thing too, as Will was mentioning earlier, when you go to LinkedIn, say for example, you're applying to Black Tech, go to Black Tech, follow that LinkedIn page, follow the YouTube, follow that, whatever, because they're going to look at that. Do you actually follow, are you a follower? Do you actually listen to our stuff? Those kinds of things. So number one, make sure to do that. Number two, start to look and comment on their posts, right? So again, if you're showing relevance and you're showing interest, I will tell you, when I was working for companies and we had people apply for roles for employee resource groups, we would see, like, have you been a member of the resource group? Have you been on their Facebook site or their whatever site and commented? So you're now wanting to be a leader of this company, but have you engaged, and how have you engaged, and how often? So they want to see a level of engagement, as well. And you can do that. As Will mentioned earlier, go to the site and start reading up, use that terminology in your skills section of LinkedIn, as well as in your resume. So try to see how much of it you can start matching and speaking relevantly about the roles or the places or people that you want to be, around. So those are some of the things that could differentiate, your talent a little bit. I cannot stress enough, contact the recruiter, contact people in that company. People do actually want to see go-gettedness. They really want to see hustle. And seeing that is a very positive, aspect for recruiters, as Will mentioned, that are actually going through a lot of pressure right now.
Yep. I want to highlight, if you are watching our live stream and you want to chat, and we want to really turn things over to our live stream audience so that you can interact. We have a question from Alamade, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. So I apologize if I mispronounced it. I'm going to bring his question up. He's coming to us from Twitter or X, depending on how you refer to it. And he comments about something that's happening with recruiters. He says, "I would like to also point out poor recruiters." Wow. So there is some realness to this. We have to accept that there's good and bad in
Sure.
every
Sure.
industry. Recruiters to do their due diligence to find talent, reach out and schedule a call. As a job seeker, we usually are excited about this when recruiters approach us, but not following up after a
Sure.
few interactions, no updates, no showing up to the interview has happened to me a few
Yeah.
times. And
Yeah.
so, really disappointed to hear about that, but it
Yeah.
does happen. I hear
It
about these
does.
stories, and when we work with people, we often hear people are excited about our constant communication. And sometimes, and I'll do a very small defense as a person who's a professional recruiter. Sometimes there's something happening with the hiring manager, and they're trying to gather more intel. But I do think there's always an opportunity to say, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate,
Yeah.
working hard for you in the background, trying to schedule follow-ups. Just wanted you to know I have not forgotten about
Yeah.
you. You're
Yeah.
still in the running.
Yeah.
I'll be in contact," and give them some type of reasonable time frame that you can reach out. And if you exceed that and get to them sooner, it's a win. But I think on both sides of the recruiter outbound recruiter candidate relationship, it's critical that there's mutual respect,
Yeah.
because it's always been our approach that we want to be your partner in your career, not for just this role, the one that we may be currently reaching out to you about, but for future roles. We really think the folks that
Yeah.
we talk to today as software engineers, that we'll talk to them again to be engineering managers, director of engineering, CIOs or CTOs.
Yeah.
So good stuff. And then there was one other thing. He had a second comment, and I just wanted to share the second half because I thought it would be unfair if I didn't. I've come to the conclusion that they reach out um,
Hmm.
to their required target talent and submit it to the hiring manager. So I think there's some of that that's true. So at some point, you may not know that the hiring manager is also working his or her network to bring people to the table. And
Yep.
so it isn't just the recruiter who's making these connections. Very often, there are other candidates from other sources who are in the mix. And once they kind of get their fill, or as a hiring manager, and I can say this as a former hiring manager too, and I guess as
Mhm.
a current hiring manager as well. When I had 3 or 4 people in play that I felt really solid, could fill the role based on their experience, pre-screen notes, then we would kind of shut it down, because one of the great challenges, quite frankly, to diversity recruiting is time. And so you try to get it to where you're only interviewing as a hiring manager, kind of 3 or 4
Yeah.
people. And if you can get your decision out of that, then it's a win. And so sometimes you may be that 5th or 6th candidate, and you may even be the best candidate, but you may have just missed the window from that point where they get a comfort level. And then you may have also experienced other candidates where you don't hear anything. They go through those top 3 or 4 people. It doesn't work out, whether it's compensation, cultural fit, timing for the candidate who is a
Yeah.
top tier person, may have accepted another job, and you come back into the mix. And so if things are delayed, don't always sour, stay positive. If you are interested in the opportunity in the beginning, I would encourage that you maintain your interest.
Yeah, I
That
agree.
was
And, no, Will, I think that that's really good. And, it is Will's right. Um, it is unfortunate. This happens in small companies and in large companies. Some people say, "Oh, it's because they had a large applicant pool, and so we can't get to everybody." I've actually seen it happen with small applicant pools, as well. And there are two sides of it, right? And because it's the devil's advocate piece, right? So just like Will said, because I've been on both sides, on the recruiting aspect and the hiring manager, aspect. You're right. I've encouraged a lot of companies that I've worked with to make sure that you have your processes down, even if it means templated emails that you're sending out every couple of weeks to say, to Will's point, "Hey, you're still in the running," or, "Thank you for your, whatever," or "Here's where I am," this kind of thing. So you're right. And there are some processes, unfortunately, that are just not put into place place like that. And oftentimes the recruiters are really focusing on the top, slate of candidates, whether it's the top 3 or the top 5, and their focus is going there. Recruiters are also usually given anywhere between 5 to like 15 searches that they're running at any point in time. So that's a lot of management. Again, I am not at all taking anybody off the hook. It's just I've seen both sides. But to Will's point, what it is that you can control is continuing to, and it sounds like the person who wrote in is doing this, continuing to show interest, articulate your interest, stay on top of it, because minimally, at least you can keep saying, I stayed on top of my candidacy. I kept showing interest. I was, articulating, to this company. And if you did everything that you could, then, it's unfortunate because maybe there was just some processes that broke on the other end.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and I would say to anyone who's ever one of the ways you can stay safe in any job market is to have a diverse network of people, and in that network, have connections to recruiters, both in-house recruiters at companies that maybe you applied for in the past, they've changed jobs, you had a great conversation, great relationship. Continue to just, ping them, share information, find a way to
Yeah,
stay relevant, because the best way to find a job is to not have to be in a position to look for one.
that's right.
And so,
Great point.
and playing offense when things are good, because just the reality of today's environment, and really in the near future, based on everything everyone's forecasting, that that many people are going to have to consider other options for employment. But I want to talk about employee referral networks, more specifically, how they work well for you if you are highly networked, and how you're missing out if your network isn't that deep. And to Eloise's point earlier, it doesn't matter who you know. What
Yeah.
matters is who knows you. I'm going to add another line to this that I've heard that I really like is, what matters is who knows you and who advocates for you
Yep.
when you are not in the
At the
room.
table. That's right.
Yeah. And so when someone hears about an opportunity that isn't a good for them, they can say, hey, I know Eloisa. She would be fantastic for this role. I'm going to connect you to on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You need people like that in your corner. So how do you find them? And I hear this from people often who are kind of in the early middle stages of their career with aspirations of becoming an executive. And a part of it is add value. I have a number of mentors who I would say today who are older than me by anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And they frequently ask me for advice. And so don't assume because you're in your 30s and someone in their 50s who's a senior executive can't benefit from that relationship.
Right.
And my advice would be to lead with help, because there's absolutely things that that he or she doesn't know and could benefit from. And so I think if you can position yourself as a support mechanism for them, someone to bounce ideas off of, because somewhere in their organization are employees of your stature, experience, age, background, gender identity, geographic location, that would absolutely be able to help them in formulating decisions or gathering information to lead their team down a different direction.
Yeah.
So,
And Will, let me add to that quickly. When I 100%, agree with that. So those of you who, in the field of mentorship, we call those individual sponsors. So sponsors are advocates, individuals who, as Will mentioned, if you are not in the room, can you trust that they're going to bring your name forward? The thing is, though, is that usually those sponsors or advocates are mature enough in their career journey as well as personally to know, even if Will doesn't ask me, I'm going to bring him up because he's talented and, and this and this and this. Don't take that for granted, though. If Will was my sponsor or my advocate, be very direct and clear about that. Yes, offer your help and things like that because you want to be of service, but then you need to say to your sponsor, hey, Will, I'm asking you if you would be my sponsor or my advocate. To me, that's defined by, if I'm not in the room and there's an opportunity that comes up, would you advocate for me? Would you say my name? Would you bring me up for a project, for a promotion, for help, for naming? Because here's the thing, I went through years of my career because I, just like Will, I had individuals who were lined up and helping me, and I was like, oh, they got me. They got me. Like, they're going to go to the C-suite and they're going to say their name and stuff. And then they'd come back and I'm like, How did I not get that? How did I not get that promotion? Or how did I not get that project? And they're like, oh, I didn't know, that you wanted that. I'm like, how did we miss, And so I took for granted that they knew that already, right? Be direct, be very clear with what it is, the role that they play, what you need from them. And just like Will said, what you can give to them. Because if I say to Will, I'm asking if it's possible for when you're in a room, please bring my name up. I am very interested in stretch projects. I am interested in helping. Sometimes I'm just interested in listening, but if you could bring my name up, I would be really, really grateful. That's what I'm asking for you. Could I get a yes on that? Right? I've been on both sides of it. I've been a sponsor. I've been an advocate. Every time my mentees or my proteges say that to me, I'm like, got it. I got you. Like, it shows initiative, but it's also very clear. Okay. So advocate for yourself, be very clear about what you're asking for, and get the yes from your sponsor, your advocate, define that relationship. And then it's actually easier for both parties.
I am going to quote Ric Flair and Beyonce in the same sentence in
Oh my gosh.
2024. What? Here it comes. Woo! That was fire feedback. And say my name, say my name.
Yes.
That and that's I only know like half,
I know the two.
three
That's all right.
lyrics in Beyonce songs. I don't want to try to pretend like I'm a real fan, but I would say for those of you who are watching, hopefully you enjoy a little bit of my bad humor. I think it is that is some of the best knowledge. If you got nothing else out of today, specifically knowing how to ask your potential sponsor or mentor how to mentor, how to
Yeah.
sponsor, what you need, because very often those people will say to you, how can I help? What can I do to
Yep.
support you? Because they believe in
Right.
you, they like you.
Yep.
And you really need to have that in your pocket ready
Yeah.
to go to give them specific instructions. And I would also say, kind of underneath conceptually, for those of you who are part of ERGs, regardless of what your background is or what ERG group you're part of, when executive sponsors show up to ERG meetings, they don't always have all the answers. And this is
Mm-mm.
where my mentoring goes in reverse, junior person to senior person.
Yep.
Give them that type of instruction.
Yep.
Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO, I need you to, and
Yep.
then, and I would tell you, don't list any more than 3 things because they're not going to be able to process more than 3 at one time, and they
Yep.
do not have time to process more than that. But give them your top 3, and very often they will make a selection of those and say, you know what, I don't know if we can budget that. We
Yep.
can't do this one, but I can take this one to the house. So
Yep.
be specific, and then ask for time, and then ask for that opportunity to recap and circle back. So
Yep.
great feedback. We have run over our time, but I want to thank our guest, Eloisa Domingo, for joining us, and her great experience in HR and in diversity and in strategy and communication. You can find her on LinkedIn at Eloisa Domingo, and you will see lots of things on her LinkedIn profile. If you Google her, you're probably just going to see 500 pictures because she speaks a lot. And if you are looking for a speaker at your event for your ERG, if you're looking to turbocharge your diversity and inclusion program and
Yeah.
modernize a 2024 approach, she has lots of resources, lots of information, and is a powerhouse and really understands change management, especially in large enterprises. So you're hearing it from me first. If you haven't heard it before, I am a big fan of Eloisa, and I think she's going to continue to do great things in her company. And then I want to pause and just turn it over to you. Is there anything you're working on or anything that you want to share with our live stream audience before we wrap?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate that. No, just like Will said, contact me. My passion really is around making sure, again, we are in a space of crisis around diversity. You can lead through that. You should lead through that, not just individually, but as an organization. Every crisis has an opportunity for growth, learning, and brand development and employee engagement. And so that's what I'm here to help. So let me know how I can be there for you and for your organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are on Twitter, we've been able to see your comments, and those on Facebook. But today, for some reason, we have not been able to get the LinkedIn comments. So
Yeah.
if you've commented, we will try to circle back and do one of 2 things. Either text back to respond to your message, right in on LinkedIn, or we'll make a short video and just make sure that we answer your questions and get back to you, because it's our intent to help people grow in their careers, develop new skills, and make real connections. Thanks again for joining us on Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity. I'm Will McNeil, the CEO and founder of Black Tech Jobs. And if today wasn't a great day, make tomorrow a better day. Thank you.